The sun drifted slowly along the horizon, as though the weight of centuries pressed against its flaming shoulders. The city that once stood proudly on this scorched land had now crumbled into powder, like parchment scorched at the edge of a flame. Shattered windows, charred walls, overturned vehicles that time had warped beyond recognition. Everything testified to an ending that didn't come suddenly. But slowly, like an incurable disease, the ground had cracked so deeply that from afar it seemed the earth was trying to split itself open, to swallow the past and bury memories beneath layers of oblivion. Dead trees, which once adorned the boulevards, now stood like sentinels guarding an ancient temple, twisted by wind and time. They no longer had leaves, only long, claw-like branches stretching toward the sky, grasping for the last traces of warmth. A man walked among this desolation. His figure was so wrapped in cloth and dust that it was difficult to determine even his age. His backpack showed signs of many repairs, patches of different materials, bound with cords, a rusted thermos dangling from the side. In his hands he held a map, a sheet so worn that almost all the markings had faded, except for one red cross circled carefully. Each time he paused, his gaze drifted to the horizon, as if searching for something that could no longer be found. He stared at the wreckage of a world that once was home. His eyes were clear but weary, not with bodily fatigue which had long since passed, but with the weariness of those who have wandered too long without answers. Under his feet the earth crunched, raising clouds of fine dust. He passed the ruins of civilization, a school bus lodged in cracked pavement, a rusted child's bicycle nearly consumed by sand, a billboard from which the last scraps of a bright past flapped weakly. Everything was silent. Even the wind seemed to move soundlessly, gently wrapping what remained of the world in a fragile veil. For several days he hardly stopped. At night he slept in short intervals, shielding himself from the wind with broken doors or hiding beneath the remains of bridges. His meals came from unlabeled cans in his backpack. Water was scavenged from abandoned tanks and filtered with a homemade system. His life was simple, but every movement was precise, deliberate. He knew that a single mistake could cost everything. On the fifth day, he reached the outskirts of the zone, the territory marked on his map. Here, everything shifted. The remains of machinery were arranged deliberately, not scattered by chance, as if someone had tried to build barricades. The earth was darker, almost black. A faint scent of ash hung in the air. Stones were marked with strange patterns, tracks left by creatures no biology book could describe. He pulled a metallic sphere from his pocket, smooth, engraved with unfamiliar symbols. Pressing it, he activated the device. It emitted a low hum and began scanning the surroundings. After a few minutes, a projection lit up on the orb's surface, the layout of a structure hidden beneath the ground. This was what he had come for. Carefully, he began his descent, through a fissure in the earth that led to an underground complex. His flashlight illuminated smooth concrete walls, still bearing signs of the past. Sector numbers, emergency exit plans, warning labels. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of rust and mold. But he moved forward. When he reached the central chamber, he stopped. Before him stood a sarcophagus, not made of stone, but of dark glass and metal. Inside it lay a body, perfectly preserved, not quite human, yet not entirely alien. Its eyes were closed, but its features were hauntingly familiar, like a reflection in a mirror distorted by time. He pulled out another device, a key composed of 3 parts. Carefully, he inserted it into the panel. The glass began to tremble, and a low sound rolled through the chamber, like the breath of an ancient machine waking after centuries of sleep. The glass cracked with a crunch, like the breaking of an ancient frozen lake. Slowly, with the weight of buried centuries, the lid of the sarcophagus slid aside, revealing the body. It did not move, but its presence stirred something in the air, something old and primordial. Its skin was silver gray like frozen metal, and beneath it, veins seemed to pulse faintly with life. The man didn't step back. He simply stood, holding the device in his hand, waiting. A green light blinked softly on the orb, faint but steady. He knew this was what he had come for. And though no one had ever told him directly, he felt it deeply. This being was the source. The origin, the cause of the collapse. Around the sarcophagus, lights began to flicker, old, strobing, but still functional. Their glow trembled like the nerves of a system on the brink of failure. From the shadows beyond the sarcophagus, shapes began to emerge. Laboratory tables, shattered terminals, capsules with organic remnants, everything coated in dust. On the walls, signs, equations, fragments of a language no longer spoken. This was a station, one of those whispered about only in fragments, a project from a forgotten era before the fall. He approached a terminal that, surprisingly, still worked, though the screen flickered like a dying eye. Pressing a few keys, he opened the last entry, a log left by the scientists before the end. The words appeared slowly, in fragments, as if pulled from a broken memory. It revealed this being in the sarcophagus was not hostile. It was a messenger. A messenger from somewhere humanity could not understand and thus tried to conquer. They experimented, and in return they didn't awaken anger but balance. But balance always demands a price. The price was cities, nations, memory. A dull rumble echoed from above, sounds that had not followed him for hundreds of meters. The air changed, heavier, tense. Something or someone had entered the zone. The scanner on his chest began to beep intermittent signals. Life, many. They had felt the awakening. He knew he wouldn't have much time, but survival wasn't the mission. Completion was. He took one last device from his backpack, a cylindrical capsule etched with symbols that had long since lost meaning for most. Inside was a code. A key to return, or to cleanse, depending on who activated it. The being inside the sarcophagus opened its eyes. Not with fear, not with rage. Its eyes glowed with a soft light, not white, but a hue hard to describe. A mixture of blue and green, like morning dew. It didn't move, it only stared. And in that gaze was memory and recognition. It saw him as the last one, as the bridge. The man stepped forward, placing the capsule on the edge of the sarcophagus. The being slowly lifted its hand, long, delicate fingers brushed against the capsule. When it activated, the room filled with light. Not a blinding flash, but a change in the very fabric of space. The walls of the lab shuddered. A pulse echoed through the tunnels, and beneath the ground a rhythm began to stir, a heartbeat. On the surface, in the dead city, roads began to crack. Chunks of concrete lifted into the air, and from the depths burst something like roots, like living tissue reaching toward light. The wind fell still. The sun disappeared behind a dark veil, not a cloud, but a structure, like a wing or a membrane unfolding across the horizon. Everything returned to the beginning, to the core, to a trembling moment when the world still had a chance. The man fell to his knees, not from fear, not from pain, from peace, finally. His eyes closed slowly as around him a new world began to grow. Not green, not desert, different,